Hi, and welcome to the 13th episode of SteamLUG Cast. My name is Cheese, and with me I have Mim.
Hello.
And Sanatana.
How you going?
Sanatana is from Witchbeam Games, creators of Assault Android Cactus, and he's joined us to chat about the game and the reception that they've had from Linux users. We've had some technical difficulties which have prevented John and Sword from joining us this morning, but we're going to push ahead regardless. To start up, do you want to tell us a little bit about Witchbeam's history, Sonata?
So Witchbeam, it's a new team, I guess, made by old hat industry folks. We've been around since, we started the team in February of this year. Before that, there's three of us on the team. I should preface that with myself. I'm handling design. There's Tim Dawson, who's handling pretty much everything you can imagine, from game concept, design. He's our only programmer, he's our only artist. He's learning how to do everything himself, basically. And then a third member is Jeff Van Dyke, who's a very, very talented musician and composer, audio engineer, who's worked on things like Total War and other games like that, dating back to doing the soundtrack for the first Need for Speed. And he's doing our soundtrack and everything audio related. So that's who we are. And basically, in February this year, Tim and I decided to quit our jobs and pursue independent development because we've been working in the games industry for several years and never really had the opportunity to make the kind of games that we really felt passionate about or interested in. There was always some overriding goal that had to be pursued that was not to do with actually making a really great game. And subsequently, we've been at a bunch of studios that have all closed down. In February, we quit the jobs we had. We started work on Cactus, which we think is a really cool project. And when we went to Jeff to ask him advice on finding a composer, he was so excited about what we were doing, he asked to join the team instead. And ever since, we've just been making games.
So, Assault Android Cactus, you want to sort of describe the game a little bit and maybe talk about some of its inspiration?
Alright, so Cactus is I'm going to refer to it as Cactus from now on because the name is pretty cool, but it's also quite long. So Cactus is a kind of manic twin-stick shoot-'em-up. I think it's how we've been describing it. I've personally been describing it as what you might have expected if someone was still making arcade/Dreamcast games in 2013.
Nice.
Because that's where our biggest influences come from. So we tried to blend what we think is interesting and fun about the best classic twin-stick shoot-'em-ups, flawless, kind of smooth controls and action. So the game is really optimized to try and get it to run smoothly with 100 enemies on screen, and just make sure that the feeling of moving around, dodging attacks and firing your weapon feels really good. And from there we added in a lot of bullet hell style elements with the enemy attacks. So the way that they spawn is very twin-stick shoot-'em-up classic, where they're spawning around you in specific kind of patterns based on where you're standing. But the way that they attack is very structured and intended to force you to move and dodge in the way that a classic shoot-'em-up would. So slow-moving bullets or lasers, rocket projectiles that are on a time delay, that kind of thing. And then the final element that we tried to chuck in was kind of dynamic levels, I guess. Every level's got its own theme, so it might be a level where the lights turn off and the enemies swarm you from all sides because you can only look in, have a light in one direction in front of your character, or a level where the walls and the floor are dynamically changing to create a completely different layout so that you have to deal with the different strategies of, is it a wall, is it a floor, is it a hole, that kind of thing.
I really like the dynamic nature of the levels. Really brings a variety of gameplay that I wasn't expecting when I first played it.
Thank you. It's something we're pretty proud of. Early on, it wasn't such a big part of the game, but people's reaction to it has really propelled us to try and make sure that every level has a unique feeling. And then, based on the kind of, I guess you could call it that level's specific gimmick, we try and give it that identity and make it so you have to play it in a totally different way to the next level that's coming up.
I think that kind of variety is important. One thing that so bullet hell games do sometimes suffer from is a kind of repetitive nature where things start to get a little bit boring is probably not the right word. It's still pretty hectic, but just get a little bit samey, and that's something that you guys have managed to very, very firmly avoid.
It's a big part of the way that we want to make the game, and a big part of the way that Tim in particular views the design elements. And when he went to look at the first boss, he said, alright, we're going to make something that's really bullet hell. It's got tons of bullet patterns, and he uses rockets for the first time. But then you go to the second boss, and he's basically, well, we talked about it a lot and came up with the concept that the second boss would be something he completely sidesteps that gameplay mechanic that you expect. You go, oh, it's a boss, it's going to be bullet hell, and she's actually a swarm character who uses 150 wasps like a virtual extension of her arms to attack you in different ways. The goal is to keep you guessing about what you're about to experience next, and then you always use the same skills to deal with it, because the character and the way they move and act doesn't change, but it's the environment that's changing to make you have to use your skills in a different way.
The way that gives you access to familiar mechanics, whilst also shaking up the familiar, is it's a really nice way to get people to be able to still use the skills that they've learned, and still have fresh gameplay. So Cactus has an all-female cast. Was this something that came about intentionally, or was this a kind of emergent thing that appeared as you brought the game together?
This is probably in our top 3 most common questions, actually. It's a really interesting question too. As much as I'd like to just say we were trying to be terribly controversial and buck the trend, it's actually something that just happened organically through the course of designing the characters in the world. I'm proud of the fact that we have an all-female cast and that people feel comfortable with them. My family and my female members of my family look at the game and go, hey, it's not like terribly sexist like many, many, many games that they've seen me play over the years, which is nice. But ultimately, it came about because we were designing Cactus, the main character, as the protagonist. We started looking at side characters or alternate skins that might be useful for a multiplayer component before the game even had co-op, because now it's very much a single player and co-op game, but at the time it was totally single player. And we started designing these alter egos, these very non-Cactus like characters that would be interesting. So Holly the bookkeeper, and at one point she was going to be a potential NPC in a different type of game, but it all just kind of worked out that they were really interesting offshoots in different styles to Cactus, both gameplay-wise and personality and graphically. And after 2 or 3 of them got designed, we just rolled with that throughout the rest of the character designs, because it was so interesting to stay with that theme, but then keep making them all different and interesting.
So, in addition to having different characters, each of the different characters in the game that you can play have dramatically different mechanics associated with them. How hard has it been to maintain that level of distinction between the characters?
Very tough. Actually, a long time ago, not many people know this, but there was a long period where the characters actually didn't have any distinction between them gameplay-wise. You could mix and match between any of the weapons at any time. But what we found was it actually led to very boring gameplay, because it was difficult to, when you had 10 weapons, very difficult to balance them so that they were useful in the same ways. They would often find like a power combo that everybody would use, and ultimately it just meant you were picking a color rather than a character. So we looked at what traditional shoot-em-ups have done, and the cave shoot-em-ups, with giving the characters very unique weapon sets and attributes that make them identify with their characteristics and their playstyle, to really strengthen the fact that they're different people. We actually ended up adopting that system, which allowed us to balance the game a lot nicer. So the balance between each character is now a lot tighter, because we can give them a weapon that's good at short range and a weapon that's good at long range, or a weapon that does good area of effect plus a weapon that does really good single target damage. And by doing that, it allowed us to make the gameplay better, but it also allowed us to make the characters more unique and more distinct. So it's actually worked really well.
I'm just going to sidestep for a moment and welcome Derrida, who's just joined us as a fill-in host. Thank you for coming along.
Good evening. Thanks for having me on such an incredibly short notice.
Hey.
With the having the different attributes for each character, I imagine that would then contribute to replayability. I mean, I've only played the demo so far. I just upgraded last night to the actual game. Thanks, Jesus. But yeah, I found that I was like, right, I'm finally getting good. Like, I could, get good at this one character, and then I have to have a go with someone else and completely, sort of change my tactics because I have to get familiar with the weapons that they use and their strengths and weaknesses.
I really hope it contributes to the replayability. It's one of the things we're gambling on, I guess, with the game is that we think the game is fun because playing the game is fun and not necessarily because you're just trying to see all the content. So I'm hoping people come back and just want to play as Lemon or Holly and see what it's like to use the cannonball, and especially the unlockable characters who are going to be extremely unique is how I would describe their weapons. So yeah, definitely that's a big part of it. And when you go into co-op, that's an even bigger part of it because you can start mix and matching out of the 8 potential characters depending on how many people you're playing with. There's a lot of different combinations.
We've just had a question from chat where Rake is asking what engine you used and what art creation software is being used at the moment.
So the engine is being used as Unity, so pretty much like 90% of indie games these days seem to be making, which is super convenient, but it's one of those things where when you say it, people have an expectation of what goes along with that, and I feel like, I know it's a stupid thing, but I feel like it's my job recently to try and explain that even though it's an engine and it has a bunch of inbuilt things into it, ultimately 90% of what you do is still your own kind of takeaway, because we get a lot of people asking us how does the game run so good, and the simple answer is that we're very careful about how much we do on the screen and not using a ton of unnecessary post effects or crazy things that kill your frame rate. So I really actually recommend people give engines like Unity a bit of a go if you're a very hardcore developer and want to take a look at things. You can still get a lot of unique elements or unique graphics and performance out of an engine like Unity or any standalone engine if you're just willing to, I guess, take your own approach to things.
I suppose the double-edged sword that Unity has in that regard is that it's accessible to a lot of people who don't know what they're doing.
That's true. So many people tell us when we say we're using Unity, they're like, oh, how do you deal with the terrible performance? Like, well, it doesn't actually have terrible performance. It's like, I used an engine when I was with Sega that had terrible performance, and the performance would go between terrible and not terrible depending on who was using it at that time of day, because it's understanding of what you can do and what's expensive.
Right.
At one point, I had I believe there was an artist who he turned 30 different things into dynamic real-time cloth, and they were in the background. They were 100 meters away from the camera. The game started running terribly, and I was like, well. And then somebody turned them into an animation, and the game started running about 10 times faster, and it looked exactly the same. So it really is about how you use a system rather than necessarily things being faster or better just out of the box.
But I feel like the big Kickstarter campaigns by all these big names like Wasteland 2 and Project Eternity legitimize Unity even more now because they are using it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're using it really well. Project Eternity looks just gorgeous. Oh, I was just going to cover the art tools and things. So Tim's using 3D Studio Max as our art pipeline with Photoshop for texture work and things like that. And for the videos and things that we've made, I've actually done all of that edited in Blender and then composited in Blender as well, and just using Virtual Dub and other things to put it in different formats.
Have you considered using Blender's built-in non-linear video editor?
Yeah, that's what I use
for
all the video editing.
I haven't had a chance to really play around with it myself yet.
It's very cool. It's as with everything Blender, I think it's really awkward at first and only truly useful when you're kind of at a master level with the concepts at play. The power of the tool is indisputable. Our trailer is made entirely using Blender's nonlinear video editor, and I think it's great. The other thing I use is GIMP for all of the gameplay related, I guess, HUD prototyping and the levels with the dynamic floors and dynamic elements. I paint all those textures that create those patterns in GIMP, which is pretty cool.
It's really nice to see some open source software playing a part in the workflow there.
It's free, and it's pretty good too, but it's also free.
One really important question: GIMP, joint Windows mode or separate Windows mode?
I think when I was using it, it defaulted to separate Windows modes. That's what I was using, but I feel like next time I use it, I'm going to try joined Windows mode because I read about it, and that's definitely what I want.
Yeah, I think it's definitely better.
It's quite awkward in separate Windows mode sometimes when you click in the wrong place. Oh god.
I don't know. I have been using the multiple document interface for I don't know, since I switched. I think I stopped using Photoshop in about 2005, I think. And yeah, it definitely took a long time to get used to. But if you can use Tab fairly regularly to get the other UI windows out of the way. The extra flexibility that you're offered by having, because can you move the toolbars? If you've got the toolbars and stuff floating in the single document interface, you can't move them outside of the confines of the window, can you?
I don't imagine so.
So yeah, I kind of find that a little bit restrictive. I have kind of multiple monitors, and I want to be able to just have just the toolbar on one screen without expanding the entire window across, because that eats up a lot of screen real estate that I don't necessarily want to use. Getting sidetracked on the GIMP there. So what are the biggest hurdles that you've encountered and the most pleasant surprises that you've had along the way whilst developing the game?
Jeez, hard-hitting questions. I should have read these beforehand and developed predisposed answers. I'd say the biggest hurdles, it's a tough one. The things that actually kind of hurt the most are things that if you talk about them, they're probably not actually going to be that helpful, but I think the feeling of being ignored is a serious hurdle. I don't like to talk about personal hurdles that we face during development because I think it's more about like you're talking about something that's useful to somebody else that might not be so personal to us. So if it's a professional hurdle or like something to do with the game itself, definitely the feeling of being ignored when you send out 50 plus personalized emails to various places, even like Australian game coverage websites, and like maybe 5 of those 50 will even respond, and of those maybe 2 or 3 will actually even look at your game. When you're sending out a free copy of your game and all the information you possibly jam in there, and yeah, like 90% of them don't even get back to you with a no thanks. That's tough.
Yeah, that sounds pretty tough.
And then that continues on even worse percentage scale when you're talking about contacting international sites. And then the next day you see like 10 Kickstarters being mentioned on those sites when they don't even have a game yet, and then that like doubly hurts. But no, that's the biggest hurdle, is just trying to like show people the game. Even if people hate the game, I'd rather people play it. Like the last game we made before Cactus was a free, like not free to play, but an actual free game that we made in like a weekend and then spent a couple of weeks polishing up. We had 10,000 downloads or so on Android, and it was just really fun just to make something and get thousands of people playing it and get feedback. And so yeah, I want to put the game out there for people to see, people to play, even if they just check out the demo and they say it's not for them. I'd rather people know about it and get to experience it. Most pleasant surprises would have to be just, I think the sensation experience of going to conventions like PAX and Eurogamer Expo and actually seeing people play the game and respond to it was way beyond my wildest expectations.
It was great to see you guys at PAX earlier this year.
It was just like amazing. People came through. You came through and you played it, and you came back on another day and checked it out. And I was barely remembering people's faces and names, but still managed to say hello again. And yeah, just there were little kids playing it, and they were loving it. There were parents playing it. There were couples playing it. Just seeing that people of so many different backgrounds to gaming could come up and give it a go and enjoy it was something that shocked me, because I always thought our game was stupidly difficult. And yeah, just everyone loved it. I think out of the people that played it, there was maybe less than 5 who couldn't actually get through the first level.
I don't know.
And that's out of like hundreds and hundreds of people. I think you did alright.
So you guys spend a lot of time interacting with the community in your Steam discussion hub or Steam community hub. How do you find that to be? How do you approach feedback? How do you take stuff on board, and how do you communicate things to the community as they raise concerns and interests and express enthusiasm for the game?
I think the important thing is to remember that players are never wrong about how they feel. Like, no matter what you think as a developer, no matter what you think as anyone, when somebody posts something, how they feel is not up for debate at all. Whether it's being happy, sad, angry, whatever it is. But at the same time, I've done enough user testing and worked on enough games and seen enough people talk about games that I'd say maybe most of the time players are completely wrong about why they feel the way that they do. So it's a very tough thing to actually take your feedback on board and go, I understand that you're frustrated with the game at this point in time. No, it's not necessarily because of this exact mechanic that you demand that we change in this very specific way, but we're going to try and change the feel of the game so that you don't have that frustration. You know what I mean?
That's very diplomatic.
It's the truth, though, because if you ignore them, if you go, well, they're just sour grapes, or they're not good at the game, or something like that, and you invalidate their feeling, you're not helping yourself and you're not helping them. But at the same time, you can't, if you read the forum, half the people who say that they're feeling the same way say they think it's because of reason X, and the other half say they think it's because of reason Y, and oftentimes those things are mutually exclusive concepts, so they can't both be right.
When we had John Warner from Over the Moon Games on recently, we talked about this notion of at any point in time, you could be making, from where you are, you could be moving forward in a huge number of directions. There are a huge number of different games that you could possibly end up making, and all feedback is legitimate. It's just whether or not that feedback is for the game that you want to end up making that becomes the thing.
And for every time when someone tells us that we have to change mechanic X, or we'll never get anybody buying the game or supporting the game, I guarantee you there's somebody out there who, if we change mechanic X, will stop enjoying the game.
Yeah, that's a hard call to make. But I guess that's one of the challenges of being a game developer, is to say, well, this is my game and this is what I'm going to make.
It's a very fine line. People get very angry if you try and if your default response is to tell them that this is my game and this is how it plays. The first response you're going to get from people is, well, then I'm not interested in you because of your attitude, not even necessarily because they don't want that game. So it's a tough thing to try and explain to someone that, at some point, if their desire for what type of game they want to play is so different from the type of game you want to make, then ultimately they should be playing something else or make their own. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
for sure. And I do notice that in a fairly common piece of feedback that I see people giving you guys is a request for online multiplayer.
Yeah, that's something that we want to do, actually, and I take a great deal of pride in the fact that thread on that is 4 pages long or something, because it shows that there's 30, 40 people out there who love the game enough to go on the forums and say it needs online multiplayer. I don't necessarily feel the best when they tell me that the game is worthless without online multiplayer, but I take it more on the positive side, that those people like the game so much that they went on the forums to tell us that if we put in online multiplayer, they would love the game even more.
I think that kind of notion of taking that feedback from a perspective of these people want to play the game with their friends, I think that's really positive. It's a really good angle to look at it from.
And hopefully one day we can actually do online multiplayer. It's a catch-22 though, where It's definitely not possible right now because we're so stressed not stressed in the sense of, dying or anything like that, out of the pressures of it all, but stressed as in resources are stressed to the max. That we can't really be adding a massive feature like that unless we were to delay the game by several months, which means that we would run out of money and then we'd be really stressed. So it's not something you can actually tackle until you're coming at it from a position where you have total stability, both financially and development-wise.
And multiplayer really, particularly network multiplayer, isn't something that you can really just kind of retrofit in there. You guys have put a lot of effort into tuning the game up, and a lot of that would be potentially undermined once you start dealing with coping with latency. You possibly have to, I don't know if you've got any kind of prediction models in place at the moment, but as soon as you throw that sort of stuff in, it really changes what you can and can't do. And it might be not possible to get exactly the same feeling that you feel for the game that you've got at the moment. And that, in that respect, you could totally be detracting from the game if you pushed ahead and tried to implement a feature like that.
A non-perfect version of online play would definitely be hurting more than it would be helping. And by non-perfect, I mean there's something just kind of rammed in there with no decent way to connect to your friends or anything like that. We do have we have strategies and plans. We've talked about it, how we would handle it, and the best way, because we're not a directly competitive game where the players are interacting with each other or hurting each other. There's a lot you can do with, I guess, allowing it to desynchronize a little bit and just keeping track of enemies and when they're dying. Kind of like Monster Hunter, how everybody sees the monster in a slightly different way on their screen, but it's still an incredibly complex undertaking, especially to retrofit it into a game, as you said, that was originally designed to not have it. It's definitely something that you want to, if you are going to tackle it, be tackling it from a position where you don't have ridiculous time or financial constraints.
So I do have a kind of very game-specific question. What does S stand for?
It's, S rank. It's a secret. It stands for secret. There you go.
Secret rank. Oh, I was trying to work it out last night. I was going super. Not that I've ever got an S.
Or special. I'm not sure. It actually doesn't have a meaning quite yet. It probably should, though. Maybe some people could post some suggestions on the Steam forum.
Smashing. Oh.
Smashing score. Yeah, that works.
Isn't that just the traditional thing with Japanese games and their scoring?
Is it?
It is very traditional. It's well, you're meant to think that it caps out at A, right? Because it's a grading system on letters, but then it goes to S because that's awesome.
And then sometimes you get double S, and I find that offensive.
We opted out of SS, and we went for S+.
Nice.
Well, it'd be pretty bad if you got an SS rank and she's doing the whole, hand up to the top of the head thing.
Yeah, no, that is going places I wouldn't want to go.
Hey, she's doing the victory sign.
Wow.
It's legit.
Wow. That was good. Thank you.
So on the Japanese influence of, the style of the game and your ranking system and stuff, where did that come from? Are you just a fan?
The whole game is heavily influenced by Japanese-style shoot-'em-ups, twin-stick shooters, and arcade games. We're talking like Ikaruga, Radiant Silvergun, anything made by Treasure over the last 20 years, or however long they've been making games, I'm not sure. And we just love those type of games. I think the influence is throughout the whole experience. If you're looking at it down through, the art style is kind of Japanese inspired. I mean, it's not quite. It's kind of Tim's own style, but it's more Japanese than not. And then that permeates through to the twitchy gameplay, 60 frames per second focus, so that things are really responsive and all the mechanics are quite tight. There's no real input latency problems and no QTEs or anything like that. So it's a focus on being very pure.
The voices mainly the voices. Are they just placeholders? Is that what it's going to be? I'm not, to be honest, entirely sure who is talking when they say, battery over here or whatever. Is that the android herself is like going, oh, there's a battery? Or is there some sort of like system that's letting her know that there's stuff going on?
So that's definitely the character. You'll notice it more in multiplayer where they have different voices. So you can tell, like, the character who's closest to the battery, for example, will call out when the battery appears. And the character who picks up the power-up will call it out. So, you can tell who's picking up what when. And they also have a little bit of interaction where they, lightly insult each other when you take over the lead in a multiplayer match of scoring, because it's competitive co-op. But the voices that are in there now for the androids themselves are totally placeholder. Like, they're stylistically where we want them to be, with that slightly robotic, a lot of filtering going on to give them beyond human sound effects. But ultimately they'll be replaced by real voice actors in the next month or two. Maybe our friends, maybe professionals, depends how much this costs. I know that we got a quote at one point for 10 characters was going to cost like $15,000, so we'll see how that goes.
Should go into voice acting.
Yeah, you should. And actually, the only two characters who are properly voiced at the moment are Embryo and Vespula, who are voiced by my good friend Dan Lettinen, who I used to work with. He's the voice of Embryo, the booming, epic, evil boss. And Jeff's wife, Ange, is actually the voice of Vespula, and I think she does a cracking job.
Yeah, nice. And
so have a listen next time you're playing them.
Are there one or two characters that share the same voice?
I think Starch and Cactus at the moment are sharing the same voice, and when we input the new characters we put in, we'll probably all share Cactus's voice for a while as well.
I think that's where Bims got confused. I almost only plays Starch, and she was playing as Cactus.
Yeah, I was like, they're the same.
They sound exactly the same. The 4 starting characters all have unique voices. All 8 will eventually have unique voices, though. It's just time.
Yep.
So what kind of response have you had from Linux users so far?
It's been varied, actually. It's been a pretty good response. There's quite a few glitches that we didn't see coming, even though we tested on a variety of Linux platforms. I think it's due to just the sheer, difference in environments you can have on the platform that is called Linux, but is actually so many different distributions and hardware sets. It's basically like you take PC, which has already got a ton of different configurations, and then you add 1,000,001 operating system configurations. So it's been really good. They've been very helpful, though, whenever they do encounter a problem. It's Linux users are, in my experience, typically more technically oriented computer users, so they're able to provide very distinct feedback.
Oh, stop it, you.
That's good. I mean, one of the guys on the forums is a Linux user. He's basically been a super fan of the game, and he's wrote a bunch of articles on breaking down how the scoring system works, how the battery works, like reverse engineering all the mechanics of the game, which is pretty cool. And whenever he ran into a problem, he would contact us straight away and say, it's on this specific distribution, and it's this problem, and I think it's because of this, and I solved it in this way, but maybe you can solve it automatically on your end. So very cool.
Oh, handy.
So
also, I'm not sure on the stats, but I think maybe we've sold more copies on Linux than Mac.
That wouldn't be surprising.
No, it doesn't seem that surprising.
Someday we'll be so progressive that I don't have to ask this question, but why did you decide to support Linux from the start? Did you have a personal interest? You're a Linux user, or is it just good now? Everyone seems to be slowly getting into supporting Linux. Is it the cool thing to do?
Well, I always wanted to support Linux because we're working on an engine that we could. Basically, if we were writing our own engine, we would have supported it too, but we're working on an engine that did support Linux, unlike many of the off-the-shelf engines. And actually, for the longest time, Tim wouldn't let me announce that we were going to be putting the game on Linux, even when we were totally sure that we were going to put the game on Linux, because he has this big thing about how he wants the game to actually be up and running on various platforms, or as close to up and running as you can get before we even start talking about supporting it. So it took me, I had to go and actually build a Linux computer and put all the right hardware in it and get the game up and running and then fix a bunch of bugs and do all this stuff before he'd let us even talk about it.
That's a darn reasonable policy, I think.
It is pretty reasonable, but ultimately we were always going to put the game on Linux. It was just he wanted to make sure that we actually had it up and running first. It's a little bit harder with announcing console ports when it takes a lot longer to actually get something properly up and running on a console. But it does run on the Wii U right now, which is pretty sweet, and we're getting there with Sony stuff too.
I guess the advantage, if you've got stuff running, it means as soon as you start to get the word out, you can push a demo at someone. If there's someone who's really keen to pick it up and talk about it or cover it or whatever, you can you're there from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important that if you support a platform and there's a reasonable expectation, like if platforms that are at a similar state are available, you should be available on all of them. I mean, Linux for us was always probably the least tested because our development environments are both Windows. Although actually maybe Mac. No, Mac's not the least tested because Jeff uses it for some of his audio stuff. So Linux was the least tested for a while, but we've got a lot of friends who are very heavy Linux users and make sure they're up to date on the builds. And I'm still testing it on our in-house min-spec machine quite regularly as well.
And what distributions do you test on?
I'm testing on Ubuntu. I think we're running 12.04 or maybe 12.10. And I've got friends who are just running a ton of different versions that they switch out in and out all the time. I have a spreadsheet somewhere, I'm sure I can keep track of it, but I don't know. Mostly I leave it to them to test things, and then I know specific people on the forums who are running various versions as well. We don't actually have that many machines, so testing on a ton of different distributions is very time consuming.
So it looks like John's just joined us again. Hi, John.
Hello. My router died, so I had to replace it.
Damn.
That was quick.
Luckily I have the old broken one still in a box. Yeah, I don't know what. All I can say is don't buy TP-Link routers, because the Wi-Fi one I bought at the same time is also having issues, and they're only 4 months old.
So I find the pacing of the levels that it's more than you would find in a traditional bullet hell game where either enemies come in streams or they come in discrete waves, and once you've killed enough things, you move on. It feels like Cactus has multiple multiple waves happening at once, which are tuned to the rate at which you're moving through the game. It feels very, very much like the pacing is both tailored to how you're playing, but still structured as though it were part of a broader level. I don't really know how to describe it, but is that something that you've been consciously going for, or and if so, how have you kind of approached that?
Our spawn system is actually quite, how do I say this without sounding super kind of arrogant, but it's quite an intelligent spawn system in the way that it handles things, in the way that you set it up, and it kind of takes the rest from there because of just the way that we decided to set it up. Basically, it is discrete spawn, like waves, where we set what's going to be attacking you, and then when you defeat everything that's on that list, it'll spawn the next wave. So you get these little moments where you're finishing off a wave and there's only 1 or 2 enemies left on screen, you defeat them, and then 10 new ones will spawn all at once. But the way that it spawns those waves is actually it's actually an entirely deterministic game that uses the player position at all times to determine things like enemy spawn position and what can actually spawn. So we say the wave is going to be made up of 10 of enemy A, 5 of enemy B, and 1 of enemy C, but it can only spawn in group sizes of 3 of enemy A, and so on and so forth. So you kind of control the pace at which the enemies appear separately to the way you control the maximum number of enemies that can actually appear, and then again separately to the way you control the overall wave itself and how many types of enemies and things are going to be in there. So you've got control at multiple levels, and then the game kind of works itself out in terms of how it actually plays out based on where you are and how quickly you're defeating the enemies. So you can set like a min cap and say there's got to be at least 5 enemies on the screen at all times, or it can spawn more. And it's a little bit complicated to get, like, for development purposes, it was a bit complicated to get my head around at first, but I think when you play the game, like you're saying, it gives you that sense that it's really tailoring the experience to how you're playing it, and the only way that things can really go wrong is if you get defeated a lot and you get kind of overwhelmed. But even then, we have ways to cap the max number of enemies that can be attacking you simultaneously. So yeah, does that help at all?
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I guess battery spawn times end up playing a role in the pacing of the level as well. Do battery spawn on particular enemies that are selected at the time that you start to run low on battery, or is it kind of random?
Well, there's no actual random element in the game of any kind.
Right.
It's something that was really important to us, actually. Not a single thing, be it enemy spawns or level dynamic elements or anything, is run off of a random number generator. If we ever want something that appears to be random, then we filter it by a metric that is different enough that it's unlikely for you to see the same result twice. So, for example, in the hexagon level, I'm driving which hexagon changes based on which one's closest to you, minus the ones that have any enemies or players standing on them. In a regular level, the pickup that drops, like the colored power-up that drops, is based on the fraction of the second at which the enemy was killed. So theoretically, if you were playing the level twice in the identical way, where you moved in the identical way, you shot in the identical way, and you defeated enemies at the identical times, you would have an identical game experience. Realistically, it's impossible for you to, well, not possible, nearly impossible for you to actually recreate that. So, just to cover the random elements. As for the battery, it's also not random. It's based on, there's a counter that you're working up by defeating enemies. So the faster and more efficiently you defeat enemies, you will find a new battery by defeating a certain number of enemies. So while it is like a value that you don't see, the only way that you could actually game it, even if you could see it, would be to defeat enemies quicker, which is what we want you to do anyway. So it's kind of like, one of those things where to play it best, you don't actually need to know how the mechanic works, you just need to play the level as well as you possibly can.
And then that opens up an extra level of alternative gameplay when you bring extra characters in, because they encourage you to move differently, they encourage you to play differently, and you end up exposing your different kinds of behaviors within the level itself because of the way that you're behaving differently as a player.
Yeah, you can actually find you'll have drastically different experiences in a level if you, for example, if it was a circular level, if you moved around it clockwise versus counterclockwise, you might have totally different positions and spawn orders and things for the enemies, because they're all driven off of varying factors of which enemies you're defeating first versus which position you're at when they go to spawn, that kind of thing.
I have noticed that in is it Oxygen?
Yeah, that's the donut level.
Yeah, I had noticed that a bit.
And the goal is to try and control the intensity of the gameplay. So we want it to be quite intense all the time, and you need to be able to be, fighting the next enemy very quickly, one after another, to keep your chain up. But it is funny how much people, I guess, assume that there's like a lot of random elements in the game, and how much we've really tried to fight against having any random elements. With the battery in particular, people can sometimes, like, if you fail a level, the first thing that goes in your head, it happens to me, it happens to everyone who ever plays a game, when you fail at the game, the first thing that goes through your head is, did the game cheat me in some way? And it's immediately the first thing that you think of is, oh, I bet it's just random how these things happen. But we tried very hard to make sure every mechanic, even if it's something that's happening behind the scenes, is totally deterministic. And our design goal was, if we're not explaining the mechanic to you in literal terms, like we're not breaking out a spreadsheet to show you how it works, it needs to be a mechanic where, to get the best out of it, you simply have to play your best, which is how the battery mechanic works. If you defeat the enemies as quickly as you can, you'll get more battery.
On that note, we might finish up the interview portion of the event and move on to some community stuff. Before we do, was there anything else that you wanted to say about the game or about anything?
Please go and download the demo on Steam. The demo is free, as all demos are, but I feel like that's the way you try and tell people about a demo, so there you go. And yeah, let me know if you like the game. Post about it. If you got any questions, go to the Steam forums. We're always there. It's on sale on early access for $15 right now. And yeah, would love to get some more Linux users playing the game.
So after the cast is done here, we're going to have sort of a group play. We're all going to play the game on our own and kind of chat and mumble and talk about what we think of it. So if anybody's still around after the cast, then we'll do that as well.
Cool. The demo is only like 100 meg or something, so download pretty quick if anybody else wants to check it out at the same time that we do that after the cast.
Sanatana's given us some Steam keys, which we might distribute at the end of the cast as well.
Is there a likely release time for this? Do you have anything targeted yet?
Well, we're aiming for this year, but it's looking like it may slip to January. It's tough to say. Like, we were actually really hoping to be releasing this month in November, but we slowed down a lot. Like when I went over to Eurogamer, that took a couple of weeks out, and I needed to recover when I got back. So things slowed down a bit, and we just need a lot of content left to go in the game. So maybe December, maybe January, depends how much we can get done.
Nice. Well, I do hope you get it done sooner than later.
Yeah, we're constantly going to be updating it every week. Like I was saying before, there should be an update going live today or tomorrow that actually has a bunch of new content in it, a new character, and 2 new levels.
I am so looking forward to that.
I think a lot of people are going to hate the new character, but it'll be interesting. It's one of those really divisive things, though. It's not like Starch, where people just love Starch. She's got weird weapons.
I think people like Starch because she's a bit off-kilter character-wise. I mean, that was what attracted me. But I like to think of it as the energy lance is pretty sweet.
Oh yeah, it's funny because we actually have another weapon that in prototyping I was calling the energy lance. It's a little bit different to Starch's laser.
I like that Starch's laser is more powerful at close proximity, right? So you end up like kind of charging enemies.
Yeah, that's the not many people get that. They will when we've got the codex entries and things in there when you unlock a new character and it tells you all their bio and how their weapons work. But I really like how that ends up working. That you basically you run towards death even though you have an infinitely long weapon.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Alright, so we're going to move on and cover some community stuff and some news stuff. Feel free to chime in on anything that seems interesting.
Sure thing.
So we just recapping on a couple of past events. We had Team Fortress 2 Halloween recently, where we had a full server for a few hours. Then we played for about 4 hours all up. We dropped some gifts, had a lot of fun, and I think the servers are still running in Halloween mode. Is that right, John?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware.
So if anybody's keen, drop in, have a game, have fun. There's normally people playing. We had our Worms event, and I think we had maybe 12 odd people playing at once, which was fun to try and manage since people can't join halfway through and the server browser is broken. But
Yes.
it was good fun.
Yeah, I think we had 2-3 games running at once. It was really good fun.
Yeah. And on the horizon, we've got the Assault Android Cactus event after this. We've got a Monaco event planned.
Heist them up.
That's going to be heaps of fun, I think. We've got Painkiller Hell and Damnation, which I think we mentioned last time, but we'll mention it again. We've got the Linux Porter joining us for that, and another Dota 2 event towards the end of the month as well.
Woo!
Also,
Is that before the 28th? So we could play Diatide.
I don't think it is, but I'm fairly certain the SteamLUG guys are doing some things over this weekend because I want to pop in for a bit.
yeah, I don't recall. I wasn't paying attention.
Actually, it is. It's Saturday the 23rd.
Ah, awesome then.
Fantastic. So in other SteamLUG community stuff, we had the first anniversary of the Linux beta, private beta launching. People have been sharing their stories of what the past year has been for them, which has been really nice to see. I don't know if any of you guys have had a look.
No, but I surely will now.
The Linux gaming subreddit, which we have a little bit of community overlap with, is now holding weekly themed discussions, which might be of interest to people, so go and check those out. Intok has been in touch with a Guns of Icarus online training group about seeing whether or not we can get some group training stuff happening to support upcoming events, which would be pretty cool. And I also recently had the enormous pleasure of unboxing a physical Linux game, which I've got a video of for anybody who's interested. It's Battle Worlds Kronos, which was successfully kickstarted earlier this year, and
Nice.
made by King Art Games, the guys who make The Raven and Book of Unwritten Tales.
The box was
Awesome.
certainly packed full, wasn't it?
Yeah. All the stuff was kind of loose, so it wasn't like a big box. But there was a whole lot of stuff in that package. I was pretty impressed. It's all really nicely made as well. The only downside was that the deck of cards, the box is a little bit bigger than the cards within, and it got slightly squashed during transit.
I bet they rattle as well. Oh, but it looks nice though.
Yeah, it's a sleek
Picky, didn't
package. So moving on to Steam and Valve news, there's been a lot of Steam Machine and SteamOS coverage over the past few weeks as new details have been emerging. What's your thought on where things have been going there, John? To put you on the spot. Daruda,
I
have
can
you
talk
been...
about SteamOS.
Oh yeah. Tell us, is SteamOS something that you want to target for Cactus? Is it the Steam Machine's kind of something that's exciting for you guys in that space?
We'll be there at day 0 for sure.
Nice.
I think it's really cool. I have some concerns about it. I mean, I love the controller that they've got. Actually, I think that's fantastic that somebody out there is breaking the mold on what a controller is and how you control games. So that's really cool. But the operating system itself is what I'm a bit concerned about. I kind of I get the feeling like it might be going down the same problematic path that Gabe's famously talked about Windows 8 following, where it's a closed environment, and that's kind of worrying to me. But it sounds like a really interesting operating system. I just hope that it's very modifiable, much in the same way that Linux is, and much in the same way that like Steam Workshop has made games modifiable. So I don't see why they couldn't make SteamOS like Steam Workshop, where people can contribute their modifications to it and it can become more community driven. I think that would be really interesting.
It sounds like they are intending to pursue a community driven approach, but it sounds like the default experience will be that it will launch Steam in big picture mode, and unless you're actually interested in starting to customize stuff, you probably won't see any of the underlying Linux operating system. And that's the impression that I get at the moment.
Yeah.
I think that's fine for a starting point. I just hope that they really do follow through on the convenience of customization, because we've had mods for years. I had custom skins in Quake 2, but it wasn't until Steam started with the Steam Workshop that making customizations and modifications to existing video games really became like mainstream, I guess, and something that people could do and sell their works and trade their works, and hundreds of thousands of people buying hats and things. I could totally see the same thing happening for SteamOS.
Yeah, it's potentially an interesting challenge and hurdle. I find these days, it harder to get people to install mods than I did, say, back around, 2000, 2003, kind of that era. Back when ModDB launched, and I actually had Half-Life 1 mod released. During those times, it seemed pretty common and pretty easy to get people to install and play mods. But these days, it's a lot more work. People want some kind of convenient, does it itself kind of platform.
Yeah. But don't you think mods are slowly moving towards more Steam Workshop style thing, like games in general that are designed to be moddable in the future will surely be moddable through Steam Workshop style interfaces, almost like StarCraft mods and things like that.
Yeah. I personally find Workshop to be a little bit awkward to use, but that could just be because I'm grumpy.
Well, I haven't made any content for it, so I'm not sure. I'm just looking at it purely as a consumer.
The signal to noise ratio is pretty awful. So there's some problems with the rating stuff. I think it's not as good as it could be for helping people find content that they might be interested in.
And it doesn't seem like the workshop deals with total conversions at all. It seems like total conversions still have to go through Greenlight to get onto Steam. I only see maps and skins and mini-mods, but TCs like No More Room in Hell, they have to be proper games on the store.
I imagine that's probably part of pre-existing agreements with game engines and the rest. They would have to mark certain games to be Steam Workshopable for TCs, wouldn't they? And then it's then you have the problem of users wanting to mod a game that developers probably wouldn't, that they're not friendly to it. So, how would you do a total conversion like that?
How do you represent that within the client as well?
Yeah. And I mean, I've been quite vocal on Twitter about it would be great if there was Steam Workshop support for replacement game engines, because on Linux we have quite a few open replacements for games, and it would be brilliant if, for game developers that are frankly hostile to Linux, and yet there's this open replacement, it would be great if someone could upload it to Steam Workshop.
So it could be ScumVM or OpenMW or so forth.
Exactly, yeah. So it's maybe as we see this sort of change to people gaming on SteamOS, that because it's a sort of an integrated flow, that maybe they might consider that, and then more games would come. I don't know. I know there's a lot of potential there. I'm not sure that they're going to go that way.
At the same time, there's potentially a risk as well of developers saying, well, there's no reason for me to support Linux if there's infrastructure available to service the market without me doing any work.
Yes, it's a really hard balance to strike.
For sure. So we've had a new official Steam group for the upcoming streaming feature launched, and beta participants will be selected from group members. So people should probably check that out if they're keen.
And as with most Steam groups, the sooner you get in, the more likely you are to be in the first wave.
I don't know when that launched. That was, I think it was last week.
Yes, I'm member 66.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not been open long. It does sound like it might be quite a few weeks away before they start even pushing the code fully.
Still nice to see that stuff on the horizon.
Yep. We've got a news item here where IGN's talking about Valve being the only Steam controller vendor. I'm fairly certain Valve came out and said this publicly, that it's their controller that they're playing with. They're happy to let users play with it, but they haven't said that they're going to get third party involved in manufacturing it, have they?
Not that I've seen. I mean, obviously as far as I know, they don't have any manufacturing stuff available to them internally, so they'll be outsourcing that to someone.
I'm speculating on it. They will be definitely the party that provides a controller, and if you want to sell an official Steam machine, you have to buy from them and use that controller. But I will bet on it, the way they designed it, the specs are supposed to be open, that there eventually will be third parties providing controllers. But at least every Steam machine has to ship one of their controllers, which is a good standardization effort.
Yeah, I do hope they tackle that. It would be great to see someone try and attach a headset to this controller, because I think that's the only thing it's lacking at the moment.
Does that become a bandwidth issue if it's going to be wireless?
No. There are quite a few wireless controllers at the moment that deliver pretty damn good audio over the same connection that the controller uses.
It does depend what you're broadcasting though. I know one of the reasons why they lowered the number of controllers on PS4 to 4 from 7, like it was on PS3, is that they're piping full quality game audio through the controller now, which takes a big hit on your performance. I mean, as long as you can still get 4 or more controllers, that's pretty reasonable.
We do know that Sony recently published their licenses for all the code, open source code they use on the PS4, and they do include the Opus license, and that's a pretty new low bandwidth, wide spectrum audio codec. And I don't know if that's on the controller or if that's just with their party chat, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's on there. Yeah.
You can pipe. The PS4 pad's actually pretty interesting. It's got a speaker on it for starters, so they're really intending to use piped audio. But also, you can actually plug headphones and things into it, and you can pipe the entire game audio through it, which is pretty neat for new features, and it's got a touchpad which requires a bunch more bandwidth as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pushing it. I imagine the Steam controller would be fairly alright with bandwidth though at the moment, based on the features that it has.
Yeah. What we've seen from spec leaks, they've actually got a fairly decent ARM chip in the controller, so it should be fairly moddable at a hardware level. So we'll see.
Yeah, it sounds like there's opportunities for exciting things to happen there.
I hope the drivers are quite usable on a variety of different systems and things. I know it's always been a problem in the past with drivers for controllers and proprietary formats and things. Xbox controllers, for example, always using that stupid proprietary wireless. And they use X input, but then also their wireless is proprietary. It doesn't just use Bluetooth or anything like that. So I really hope the Steam controller is non-proprietary and can be used on a variety of operating systems. I love Linux, but I just think it's great when there's no reason to lock hardware to a specific operating system unnecessarily.
Oh, absolutely.
I got a hunch that Valve are unlikely to do that. From what we've seen so far, they seem pretty open towards being permissive and not locking people into stuff.
Yeah, you'd hope so. But so far the controller's just announced for Steam boxes running SteamOS, right? So I'd like to use it on my Windows machine that I need to run Windows apps on.
Yeah. So, John, what's been happening on GitHub?
Last time I said it was fairly quiet. I think things have changed, as they tend to. Drew's been far more busy working through issues and closing the odd bug. I've actually got quite a few Linux-related fixes that I've written down from the client beta changelogs. The copy and paste bug finally has been resolved after so long. I mean, it's as if they sort of had the patch, and quite a few members of Valve have said, "I thought we'd fixed it already," but that looks to be finally solved. So now, when you're pasting keys into the dialogue, it's not going to paste a URL or something.
It's a really good thing to have bedded down now.
Some window managers were having issues with invisible windows appearing that Steam was generating, and that seems to be resolved now. They've been adding, the whole download section of the client has been having a large revision, so they've been working on different features to enable you to allow downloads to work while you're gaming and pause individual ones and select games that you don't want to auto-update, etc. There was a bug in the web rendering client where it was unable to load images. That got resolved. The runtime bootstrap, this when it updates, it regenerates the Steam runtime, and that was having issues if it got interrupted installing, and they've resolved that. And they've also recently done some work on reducing the idle CPU usage, so you should see that reduced by about half. So that's another good thing. And I think that's about it. Do we want to move on to Greenlight?
Yeah. So we had a bunch of new titles greenlit 4 days ago, I think it was. There are about 17 or so of the 40 titles greenlit are offering Linux support at the moment. I think there are others that are open to doing it, but only about 17 or so who had it specifically listed. Right,
and I selected 3 out of the list just to focus on. I wasn't very verbose going through them all. Little Racers Street is sort of a Micro Machines top-down racing game. It looks
cool.
Absolutely brilliant. You've got Undead Overlord, which is sort of the same viewpoint, sort of not isometric, but top-down, loads of sort of crowd zombies. That also looks possibly passé, but also fun as well. And there's Pixel Boy, which is a Grand Theft Auto 1 style action-adventure sort of game. They all look brilliant. But do check out the rest of the games in the list in case I've missed any.
Have you had a chance to look at them, Duda?
No, not yet. And that Greenlight list kind of surprised me. I didn't know a single title except Clang, and Clang is pretty much dead.
It's been interesting to see dormant titles getting greenlit. I don't think that's kind of good for Greenlight's image at the moment.
It's not, But can Valve really know if a project's dormant if it's not been, flagged up on Greenlight? I mean, I guess they don't actually have a feature to say this is no longer being developed. We're not interested in Greenlight anymore.
Well, they manually curate what gets greenlit, don't they?
Yeah, it's completely manual. But the other interesting thing is that a lot of a couple titles have actually been removed from the list of Greenlight games, haven't they? Ones with legal battles going on and some other things. That's what I'd read anyway, of the 240 or something that have been greenlit since the end of August.
I don't honestly know. I was following a couple of people on Twitter. They were talking about recent greenlit titles that have, finished production, let's say. So I don't know. As far as I'm aware, Valve doesn't approach projects before they greenlight them, do they? Or
no,
you
they
kind of
don't
hope they
approach
would
them before greenlighting, but they don't just they don't greenlight by any single metric. They're meant.
Yeah.
My understanding is that they're looking at critical reception and the state of development, relative movement in the recent time span, total number of votes, all kinds of things, which you would imagine if they're looking into that much detail, they're aware of the state of a game's development.
Yeah. A little uncomfortable. What am I thinking of?
I guess when
It's
you're
unsettling,
greenlighting,
that's it.
it's a tiny team, also my understanding. So I guess if they're greenlighting 250 or 240 games over 2.5 months, they could get a little bit more difficult to scrutinize every single one.
Maybe it's also possible that some of the dormant titles that have been greenlit may end up, coming to fruition because of that. Maybe that could inject some enthusiasm or some ability to attract funding for developers to get their stuff going.
Or the next dark matter bust up?
Maybe.
So have you been playing Half-Life 2 recently, Cheese?
I had been hoping to, but have not really had time, which is disappointing. Because
You had
Half-Life
one
2...
job.
I did. So Half-Life 2 and its assorted offspring have recently gained VR support on Linux in a beta update, which is pretty neat. As I'm the only person here at the moment who has a Rift and is playing on Linux, it was my duty to tell everybody how awesome it was, but I haven't yet had a chance. So maybe I can report back on that next time.
I can't wait to hear about it. So I threw this little snippet in for Linux news. NVIDIA's driver has recently gained an extension that's currently proprietary just to NVIDIA that allows their driver to capture the frame buffer with pretty low latency. I don't know if this is related to screenshots, whether it's for video capture like their Shadowplay implementation. I'm sure we'll find out in the future.
Sounds interesting.
Hopefully Shadowplay is coming over. Shadowplay is awesome.
I've heard very good things. A couple of YouTubers I follow have been talking about it while using Battlefield 4, and they're saying it's absolutely brilliant. So
it's actually, I think it's one of the best features of the next-gen consoles, and that NVIDIA managed to get it to work on PC right around the time that they were coming out. It's very exciting times.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to
Hopefully.
more general gaming stuff. Mim, what have you been playing lately?
I've been playing Forced. Cheese has been harassing me to play Forced, so I finally got around to that. He's been playing it quite a bit. I had a go at that. That's pretty interesting. I was sort of struck by the difference between how you play it when you're playing on your own and how different it is when you play with somebody else. I found that I really sucked once Cheese joined me. What else? I tried Rift, which is like a free-to-play MMORPG, but it's not really being my thing. I've had heaps of trouble running it, and yeah. Bit of Assault Android Cactus,
Yay.
Obviously, of course. Some Don't Starve, although not so much as I had been previously, because I'm sort of doing so well, I'm just terrified of death now. I'm just like, no, just keep my game there and never touch it again and just know that she's alive. Yeah. Left 4 Dead 2, Sims 3, much to Cheese's disdain. Yeah. And we started playing some Dead Space 2 again recently. Wow, everybody hates Sims. Give me a break. I bought it at a garage sale.
We're all typing in the show notes how bad The Sims is.
Oh, look, I don't know if this is a universal thing or if I'm just a narcissist, which I may have picked up from living with Cheese Nest, but as soon as I got Sims, I was like, I've got to build my house, and I've got to build me, and I've got to build Cheese, and I've been really frustrated at the game's inability to build our house properly because of, door space requirements and things like that. I was like, no! So I spent a lot of time just sort of trying to make my house, which is...
Also, you can't look like peas in Sims 3, so how do you even make yourself?
No, I know, right?
We have to go for reality.
What?
Although we're slightly thinner in The Sims, obviously. Slightly better looking and slightly thinner. With a lot more money.
That's depressing.
So yeah, that's pretty much me. Yeah, well, if you want to be a doctor in real life, then we can have money, okay?
I'm a doctor in The Sims, apparently.
Yeah. I needed money, so I got to do all the fun stuff and you get to bring in the money. Anyway, sorry, God, how embarrassing. Yes. And also we played some Dead Space 2, which I'm finally getting back to because we started that ages ago. And, yeah, I got to play that while Cheese watches and laughs at me when I jump and throw the mouse across the room and... yeah, I was like, oh my God, something scary happened, and then I'm running around looking at the ceiling, anyway. So that's me.
I can't watch you play. I mean, seriously, I see everything on your screen. I'm like, there's a dude behind you, wait, how can you not see this stuff? It's bad.
Why are you walking near that bench?
John,
just
what have you been
immersed.
playing?
Sorry, me. I've been playing some Left 4 Dead 2. Now
Hooray!
that some Metro Last Light. Has anyone else been playing?
Yes.
No.
I've been playing Metro Last Light and I finished it. And I got the bad ending and now I'm disappointed. But otherwise it was pretty good. I only ever had one crash, but some people seem to have had more problems with it.
I've had one or two crashes. I mean, I've put the settings up to max to just see if it looks any better. And it's a great looking game. I'm not too sure I like it as a game though. But yeah.
It was way too easy. I played it on Ranger mode hardcore. The only thing is they kinda made it boo-boo there, and even HUD elements you need. You can't possibly tell what you're doing right now with your controls if you don't see a HUD, like when you're changing your thrown weapons. They just said, oh, remove the HUD for immersion, and they remove that, and you have no idea if you have a grenade or a throwing knife selected right now, which is a bit of a problem when you're 2 meters away from an enemy.
Well, they're trying to encourage you to remember what you're holding in one hand.
And you don't know if you have depleted your throwing knife, so it might switch to grenades, and then, oh, I throw my no, I'm now burning because I had a Molotov.
This game sounds fun.
It is awesome, but I would advise against playing hardcore Ranger if you really get frustrated by that a lot.
It's a really good fun game if you don't mind really lengthy cutscenes that you have to slow walk through. Oh.
The thing I would advise all game developers ever, blacking out every 10 minutes is not a proper plot device. You can't just make me randomly unconscious to just make the story progress all the time. It's completely, utterly ridiculous.
But on top of that, I've been playing No More Room in Hell. I actually joined a game with Derrida for a bit, and that game's a really good fun mod, Total Conversion. Ticket to Ride for 2 matches. I was just trying to get it running, and that's not bad. The AI is pretty good though, so don't play against computer. And a little bit more of the port I mentioned in the last cast recording. So what else have you been playing, Derrida?
I've played some more Dota 2. I only suck half the time now, at least when I'm playing with my friend in matchmaking. Some more No More Room in Hell, which really has me surprised a lot. I played it years ago when it first came out, and it was really unplayable and janky, but now it's like really good hardcore survival zombie co-op game. And I recommend everybody download it on Steam. It's free, so play it. And I played another zombie game called Project Zomboid, which has finally been released on Steam and is really an interesting roguelike in the zombie genre. We had a lot of zombie games lately, but this one's still a whole lot different. It just tells you flat out, this is how you died. You start with your character and Pretty much the only thing you're sure of in this game is you will die and you will lose that character, but it's how you play that decides how you die.
That's pretty hardcore. I think my first game I died in 4 hours.
Yeah, apparently people didn't get the idea that drinking bleach kills them, and they just drank it anyway and complained that there was no warning in the game that bleach would kill you. I mean, the pointer is in the name. Don't drink bleach, kids. You should have survived on that basis alone to your adulthood. Don't drink bleach. Don't do it.
I think the problem was I spawned in a house without any food, then went on a little trek to go find some, got maimed, and then just died in the streets. It was terrible.
My first experience with the game, I'd made it into a house, and my friend had said that she wasn't feeling well and she needed to rest, so took her to the bedroom and made her lie down. And I thought, oh, you look uncomfortable. I'll give you a pillow. And then the dialogue goes, oh, I'm sorry, I was just slowing you down. And it turns out that I'd suffocated her with the pillow instead of making her comfortable.
Mim, you better be careful.
Oh no, I'm very comfortable. I'm fine. I don't need any pillows.
Anytime I'm rearranging my pillows and accidentally smash Mim, she says, oh, I'm just slowing you down. that was too traumatizing for me. I went, okay, I think I've had enough of this game. So, Sanatana, have you been playing much lately, or have you been focused mostly on development?
Playing a little bit. I've been playing a little bit of Battlefield 4, actually, which I think is an exceptional game. And I don't know why, because I hate military first-person shooters. Well, kind of hate. I'm a bit over them. But this one, I think it's the most interesting one since maybe even the first Battlefield to me. It's so much you can do in it, so I really recommend people check it out.
I found the first Battlefield boring after Codename Eagle.
Wow. Some hardcore person over here.
Man, I still play Codename Eagle. I love that game so hard.
I just enjoy that Battlefield's come full circle. They did big, epic, full-on war scale things in the first game, and then progressively it got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then people were like, wait, why are we turning this into Call of Duty? Okay, let's go back to being Battlefield, and now it's good again.
And John's
should have
just
mentioned
ducked
I've played quite a bit of Battlefield 3. No, I fully appreciate some of the levels were ridiculously small. Operation Metro was just hell.
Yeah, they have a similar one in BF4, but it's a lot better designed with multiple pathways and things like that, while you're in like a prison out in the snow. But overall, I think Battlefield 4 feels more open and interesting, and it's got a lot more of the destructibility stuff that like 3 had some of it, but I feel like they've really pushed it to a new level.
They've certainly done that. If it ever comes to SteamOS, I will definitely be picking it up, but I think BF3 will be my last console game.
I wish that somebody would make a game like that, but with a more kind of, Quake or Unreal Tournament style damage model, and preferably set during World War One.
Isn't that Red Orchestra?
That's Codename Eagle.
Red Orchestra has an instant kill model.
Yeah, Red Orchestra is not quite the same.
Hey, World War One, that's I don't hear many people clamoring for World War One based first-person shooters.
Yeah, there's Verdun on early access. That's World War One, and I don't know how realistic the damage model is, but there's trenches, lots of them.
Sweet. I know. I just find that heaps more interesting than the kind of stuff that COD and Battlefield. I have trouble distinguishing between them.
They are certainly very different games. Jeez, come on.
They were getting quite similar for a while there. In fact, the campaigns are quite similar. Similarly terrible.
I don't know. I just find, I'm like, oh, there's a big shiny plane. I'd like to get in it, and can never ever reach it because someone shoots me in the foot and I die. And then when I finally do get in, the flight mechanics are all crap anyway, and it's just boring.
I've been playing one other thing. Actually, I don't know if they're ever going to bring this to Linux, but they totally should because it's a cool game. But Rayman Legends is fantastic.
Is that the one that's available DRM free, or is that Rayman Origins? Flibbit's the
I don't
Rayman
know
buff.
on PC.
This is the fairly recent one, so I don't think it's DRM free, is it?
Yeah, no, it must be Origins I'm thinking of. It's a shame that they, because the creator, whose name escapes me at the moment,
Michael Ansel.
That's the one.
He's an incredibly creative guy. He's created some of my favorite games of all time. With the original Rayman was just fantastic, and then Beyond Good and Evil.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool guy. But yeah, I thought Rayman Legends. I think it's the first non-Mario platformer in maybe like a decade that I think is exceptional.
Nice. I know that he wanted to open source the engine, UbiArt, that they've been using for it, but apparently that hit roadblocks and didn't happen.
Yeah, that's a shame actually, because it's a very interesting engine. Like, there's a couple of projects that have been announced now using it, and it seems like it's a really great interface for just setting up 2D gameplay interactions and then being able to draw really nice art on top of it. So, I mean, Rayman Legends is gorgeous. It's 2D and 3D, and that is just fantastic. And it's very creative. That's what I like about it. Like the last project I worked on before Cactus was a platformer. It was the Castle of Illusion remake for Sega. And I was playing Rayman Legends, and I couldn't help but think to myself that I was a giant hack. Because this game was just so creative and so, like, it felt endless, that every time that I thought the game got a little bit monotonous, there was just like a new idea, a new way to play it, a new spin on something that felt fresh and new and interesting.
Yeah, a friend of mine was streaming some of the like the music levels and some of the like effects that can go over the levels. Like there's like retro pixel art style thing filter that they've got over it and stuff, which is kind of neat. It looks pretty sweet.
Very, very cool. I'm surprised actually that more of the big PC games don't come to Linux. I mean, it's not that much work anymore. It's a shame. Yeah, when SteamOS is out there, and basically for most purposes games are supporting the underlying architecture of Linux, I'm hoping that they just bring out standard Linux versions as well.
I really do hope so. It would be pretty depressing if stuff was kind of SteamOS only and had some nuances that made it awkward to run on, traditional distros.
Well, we'll probably claw somebody's face off if that were to become the standard.
We are likely to see the sort of PC ports that have happened in the last few years, though. Controller-only sort of things, fixed resolutions, and the rest.
Even though not even SteamOS is aiming for that, because they actually officially embrace different spec machines, so they need to provide some options.
I don't necessarily mind controller-only games, as long as it's heavily advertised on the game. If your game experience is designed around a controller, I think that's alright. I mean, I don't like it when the game clearly could be mapped or converted to keyboard and mouse without losing anything of what it is, but as a concept, I'm not too against it.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is we will get some ActiBliss first-person shooter, and that will have controller-only support, if that's the case. And we all know that should have mouse and keyboard control options.
Going back to where the games will arrive, I think we have to look at the Wii U to see what sort of numbers the platform needs before we start getting ports of more mainstream titles, I think. Because Rayman was meant to be a Wii U exclusive title, wasn't it? And only when they found out that the sales were so terrible for that it came to the others, that I'm just worried that people like DICE will look at it and think it's such a small niche at the moment that maybe not for this title, maybe the one in 2 years' time, but you think, well, that 2 years is quite a long time.
The thing is that unlike most of the console platforms, you kind of presumably got an unlimited lifespan on a PC platform like SteamOS. So you don't have to worry about the console life cycle to the same extent. If you're not making your money off the console within its profitable lifespan, then it's not worth the effort,
Yeah, you've got the benefit of not ever having to worry about people getting a new box that doesn't play your game. Like, there are people still making Dragon's Lair past Greenlight and sold a bunch of copies on Steam. So how old is that game?
We actually got in touch with them a while back, and they confirmed that they're going to do a Linux port. I haven't heard any updates on that in the meantime, but yeah, it's great to see that getting some fresh life again.
I do have to wonder how many times I'm going to have to buy that in my lifetime, because I've definitely got 2 copies, and you think, well, I'll probably buy a third for this, and what's the future going to be?
I bought that 3D remake, and I bought it on my Amiga, and I have a DVD box set with Dragon's Lair 1, 2, and Space Ace. And I'd be comfortable buying it again on Linux, I think.
The old games that I'm really waiting for is classic LucasArts collections.
Yes.
I just want them to release those. Come on.
It'd be so nice.
Monkey Island, Summer Max, and I also would like Deus Ex.
It's
Day of the Tentacle.
It's a little gratuitous, but it feels relevant to what we just mentioned. But at the moment, we're doing Fate of Atlantis for Game Club, and we have our final session tomorrow.
Brilliant. Enjoy.
Do you still have the writer in?
We had Hal Barwood in for the first session. He was only able to make one, but it was really good to get some insights from, because he did design, writing, and I think he co-directed it as well. And it was good to get some insight from, because he's worked on most of the indie games that LucasArts did as well. And he had some interesting perspectives on not just adventure games, but indie as a franchise as well. Yeah.
What have you been playing, Cheese?
Been playing some Assault Android Cactus, of course. We played a bit of TF2 we mentioned earlier. I picked up Glare, which is a platformer, sort of action platformer by Phobic Studios, who are formerly Team Phobic. It's been out for a week or something, I think. It's kind of nice at first. It kind of looks like it's trying to be trying, but after playing it for a little bit, it's not, and it's got some interesting mechanics. I haven't played a lot, but I'm definitely looking forward to spending some more time with it. I played some Worms Reloaded that we mentioned earlier. I played through all of the first campaign of Monaco. Some Guns of Icarus with Nimoda and the others. Bit of space-based DF9, and I also managed to pick up Dark Matter and start playing through that, which is I'm kind of impressed so far. Some of the animations are a little bit average, and I find aiming is difficult, but it's enjoyable so far. Oh, and Forced, yeah. Did I already say Forced? No.
Forced.
I met the dev team of Forced when I was over at Eurogamer Expo, actually. They're one of the other guys that won one of the categories in the Intel Level Up competition in order to get on Steam, just like us.
Yeah, nice.
They're really nice people.
I love that the game has this kind of action RPG feel to it, but has a very present, but perhaps without being overpowering, puzzle aspect as well. That there are. I don't really know how to explain it, but I really like the balance of action versus puzzle play in that game.
I feel like they spent quite a while really refining it to what it is. It sounds like the development was kind of a bit bumpy up and down, but very refined. Like they honed in on exactly what they wanted it to feel like. Yeah.
So moving on, as we mentioned earlier, Metro Last Light has been released for Linux, and people have been playing that.
There's a new racing game coming, Project Cars. They announced SteamOS support and Linux too, and this is a fairly large development team, so it's quite big news.
I haven't actually paid much attention to the game, but something that did stand out to me was that they said that they were coming for SteamOS rather than coming to Linux, and that kind of irked me a little bit. I don't know whether it should or not, but it kind of got up my nose.
Well, I think it's something people are going to talk about in the press. If you just say, hey, we're also going to Linux as well, they're like, we'll just add that on at the end of the list.
But I guess, being a Linux distro, it's nice to see it have Prime Pay anyway.
Yeah, and with the fact that it's going to be built for the runtime, it will run on our desktops. So I don't think we should be too concerned just yet.
So what have we got here, John?
I have no idea. I don't know anything about this game.
Is this one of those ones that slipped into the show notes by someone who didn't end up making it? Because I haven't heard of it either.
Possibly. I don't know.
We're on the ball today.
But I can talk about Joe Danger.
Let's talk about that.
It's a motorbike sort of trials game where you have to race through a pretty difficult course with lots of interactivity. It's got user-generated content. It started out as life on PS3, went to Xbox, got a sequel, and it sounds like they're currently working on, through a leak, well not a leak, through them updating a depot on SteamDB, that it's coming to Linux as well. and I look forward to playing that because I absolutely adored it on PS3.
Yeah, neat. Looking very, very briefly at this Luxuria Superbia game, it looks nice.
The art style's fabulous. I wonder how it plays.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to come back and check that out at another time. And we've seen the announcement that Total War Rome 2 will be launching on Steam and Linux, SteamOS and Linux early next year.
Yep, pretty much confirms what we knew from the 3 Valve reveals a few months ago, because they had Rome 2 as one of the screenshots in the background.
Yeah, so it's good to have the confirmation announcement.
Humble surprised almost no one by coming out with a centralized store on their website. That now they have individual games for sale at discounted prices. 10% goes to charity. Yeah.
About half or so of the
region
titles
locked.
now support Linux at the moment, I think.
Yes, it doesn't seem like such a win for Linux users. Sorry, Dorita?
And it's region locked at the moment.
Really?
Really?
Yes, I heard about this. It's pretty terrible.
Wow.
Seems like you can
Explain.
only get Splinter Cell Blacklist in the US.
Is that a good
And
thing or a
other
bad thing?
stuff. That's a bad thing because it's region locking. No oceans
Sorry.
on the internet and stuff.
Yeah,
also,
no, that is
Blacklist
awful.
is actually a good Splinter Cell.
Interesting. I contacted them about putting Cactus on the store. Actually, I mean, we weren't talked to before everything went up. There was actually some a whole kerfuffle in the indie scene about it, where somebody revealed some secret mailing list that only
Yes.
the very important indies were on. Us lowly people with games on Steam and humble widgets were not allowed to be on such a mailing list. So
It does also sound like
I think
some of the people involved in that kerfuffle had gotten the wrong impression or had been given some misinformation as well. So it's all sounds very awkward.
yeah, they had the wrong impression, I think, about how the contracts for Humble were being set up, but I think they had the right stuff about the mailing list. Personally, I'm not too much of a fan of the idea of like somebody taking the concept of indie development and applying it to an exclusionary style of business that benefits established people. I think that goes against the spirit of indie, but yeah, interesting.
I can't say it's I can't say it's surprising. A lot of the indie scene seems to work off being able to network with people and how to how to communicate with other developers, and everybody tries to look out for each other. But obviously you're going to have mates that you're closer to than other people, and so when things like Humble scale right up, you imagine that they're probably going to bring their friends with them as well. And it's not that difficult to spot. I've been meaning to look at doing a visualization for a while of the connections between games and game developers who have been involved in Humble Bundles, and look at what ties they all have to each other, because that's a slightly interesting thing. And I find that there is a web at work there.
Yeah, I don't think
I
it's
agree.
entirely built up of people that have been in Humble Bundles.
Oh, not entirely.
But of course we don't know the information. I mean, all we know is we were, linked to a post that appeared on this mailing list where they were discussing percentages that were taken either from the widget and the Humble store, and people were talking about the clique of people who decide what can go through Humble and the rest. So it's quite disturbing, really.
It would be disappointing if it went further in that direction and became more closed off and more unavailable to people outside of already finding success. I find the idea that successful people helping other successful people be more successful, I don't think that's particularly what the indie scene should be all about.
No.
I think that Humble are on the cusp of facing the kind, or probably have already faced the kind of problem, or are facing. Let me start again. No, there's no time. Let me start. It feels a little bit like Humble are at the point where they're, or have been for a little while, dealing with the same kind of issue that Valve faced with Steam, which is they are a very visible, very prominent platform everybody wants on, and that bandwidth, the communication bandwidth required to be able to respond to and deal with everything with the attention that it deserves is just not achievable. Steam was very hard to get onto for a while, and they tried to get past that with Greenlight. Whether that's been a success or not, I don't know. But it was always, before that, a matter of trying to get someone's attention. And again, if you've got mates, if you've got friends, then they're going to get your attention more than people you've never heard of. But they've got easier access to you.
The most puzzling thing about the Humble Store is if they're trying to do better than Steam, why do they not have a page off the store that says, here's how you get to sell your goods on our store? You can sign up, go through a couple of clicks, we'll just vet it, and then you're on. I mean,
my supposition at the moment is that they want to get all of the current titles up first.
They could at least have had a public page that said, we're doing some things, we're ramping up, it's coming in, it's coming down the line. They need to talk to people.
This is something I've said a number of times. They're not very good at communicating.
Disabled Google Wallet support for their bundles and the store. And I use Google Wallet for pretty much all my payments online because PayPal infuriate me because, they regularly halt payment to places I've paid money because, sometimes they're told to. And I think it's ridiculous that they've stopped using Google Wallet, and they haven't said why they've stopped using them. So there's, we don't know if it's because they're losing out money or they've had loads of, claim backs or something. I mean, it just would be nice if they said why they stopped using Google Wallet. And I asked them on Twitter and they haven't replied. It's, it's frustrating that for all their talk of, being more humble and open and everything else, they're actually worse than what they're trying to help. That's all.
They're taking a big chunk out of the Ralph book of dealing with the community, which is not talking to them, just doing stuff, and be surprised if it backfires.
So mentions that the Google Wallet system has changed, so they're having to integrate it differently or something. Well, thanks for that anyway.
It feels like it's awkward to to mention this, and but the current Humble Weekly sale has 2 Linux titles. One of them is not a Beat the Average title, so for once we have a title available off the bat for anybody who's keen. It's Air Conflict Specific Carriers, which I've been looking at getting for a while, to play with my exciting joystick throttle combo thing.
Still, Expeditions Conquistador is probably the one you want. It definitely is worth it.
Is it a flight sim?
No, it's a bit like King's Bounty, just in the Americas during the times of the conquistadors, as you might imagine. And you can choose to not be a horrible racist, which is always a plus. I mean, history would dictate you ought to be a horrible racist as a conquistador, but you can choose not to be.
That's the only good feature of Tropico.
To be one or not to be one?
To be what you want to be, which means, yes, to be one. Anyway, we got some news that Nuclear Dawn beta is coming within the next week, was it?
I think yesterday they'd said it was going to be tomorrow, but it sounds like there've been a couple of technical hitches at the last second, and they're going to push it out by a couple more days. So yeah, it should be this week. There's going to be a beta that anyone can opt into. It's going to show up in our game list, but we're going to need to opt into the beta branch. We're going to probably need to set up a beta dedicated server to be able to play on it. And then once they're confident that it's stable, it'll be merged into the main line, which would be nice to see. So we also have seen some new Splot screenshots start to surface, frozen by reminding us that the game is still in production, which I think is part of them ramping up to get close to a release, if we're lucky. And on that note, we might move on to crowdfunding.
Yes, Scale, a title we mentioned a cast back or two, has been funded fully. It's actually today met its stretch goal of Rift support. If you don't know what this is, it's a first-person, scale manipulating, environment-based puzzler.
Yeah.
And you've funded this, haven't you, Geese?
Yeah, I went on a rather silly Kickstarter spree a couple of days ago and hopped on board. Kind of excited to pick that one up.
I saw you tweeted about a few titles. Were any of the other ones Linux related?
I had thought that all of them were, but I discovered last night that Stasis is not.
No. What's Stasis? Just
This
a quick
kind
recap.
of isometric adventure game. It's meant to be fairly dark, inspired by sort of the serious take on sci-fi that adventure games like The Dig brought with it. It sounds really exciting, and I'd been following it for ages, and for some reason had just gotten the impression that it would be providing Linux support, which is why I just backed it without looking. And then I don't really know what the story is there, so hopefully I'll hear back on that. I also backed. What was the other one? The Girl and the Robot, this is their second crowdfunding campaign. The first one wasn't successful, so it's got a much more modest target and looks like it's about to hit it as well. That seems kind of neat. I really like the palette that they've gone with for that game. So this really kind of painterly feel to it.
Another title I wanted to mention, Discourse. This is by the developers of Snuggle Truck and Jack Lumber, if you've played with them on Steam for Linux already. It's a survival game. It's got probably one of the most interesting art styles beyond Don't Starve for survival games. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I actually haven't had much of a chance to look at Discourse, but it does seem like it'll be fun.
And full disclosure, I have backed that one.
Moving on, Paradise Lost First Contact. I hadn't looked at this until last night, but after watching the pitch video, I am totally hooked.
What is this, a stealth platformer, it says?
Yeah, so you play an alien entity that has been captured by humans, and you escape and have to get to safety and stuff. You have the ability to interact with some of the environment. There's a lot of kind of it's like a side-scrolling platformer, but you kind of hide in things and stuff. You have abilities that make you strong and resistant to certain types of dangers. But from what I can tell, you can't actually directly attack the human guards and people that are around. So it's kind of really neat looking. It's this kind of pixel art style going on, which is kind of nice. But yeah, I'm hooked. Looks great.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool actually.
In comments, people are mentioning sort of flashback art style, but it's kind of sort of if
Yeah.
Beneath the Steel Sky wasn't as muddy as it was.
Yeah, I wouldn't say flashback. Flashback's got a very
No, yeah, it's definitely not flashback.
This feels more like pixel art, whereas flashback felt more like more analog art that was down-res.
Vectory.
Well, I don't know. I never really got a vector feel out of it. It kind of
Really?
no.
Okay. Very pixely.
The cutscenes were very vectory.
Oh, the cutscenes for sure were definitely. Yeah. I
This looks
found
kind of more like Gunpoint.
yeah, it does. And something that Sanatana mentioned earlier is a crowdfunding campaign that's just launched by an Australian company, one of the first Kickstarter Australia campaigns, which is Hand of Fate. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting title. It's been made by Defiant, a group of guys from here in Brisbane, and their past work includes all kinds of things, working at Pandemic and other companies coming together to form their own. They worked on Ski Safari and some other stuff that eludes me off the top of my head at the moment, but they're really cool guys, and it's a collectible card game mixed with a Diablo-style hack and slash game. So a very kind of unique hybrid there. Single player, so it's not the co-op hack and slash experience that you'd expect, but very unique concept where you're basically playing this card meta game that determines a lot of the attributes and elements that your characters have and what you're going to go into in the action-oriented gameplay elements. So really cool.
It does sound neat.
Well, I like it because the card stuff is interesting, but you always lack that the payoff when you do something cool with cards in a card game. So transforming the payoff to be an actual playable action-packed sequence or like gameplay piece is really interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's everything that we had to cover. We might jump over into the event channel, and I will reset the Assault Android Cactus event. We'll fire up the game and continue to chat there. and once we move over there, I'll get anybody who wants a key. I only have 3, so grab one only if you need one. If anybody wants to nudge me, I can hand those on.
Okay, we're also not going to be recording, so feel comfortable chatting away.
Yeah. Thanks very much for joining us, Sanatana.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thanks to Rita and Mim for dropping in on short notice. It's very appreciated.
No problem.
And my apologies for
Nice.
dropping out.
Blame
And
the tech.
thanks for you to dropping out.
Yeah.
That was good. Thanks, guys. And sorry about the late start.